Dit is de podcast van
Omroep Friesland.
Noardewyn.
i.v.m de Vries.
Kom verder. Alles wat te speelt. Omroep Friesland.
Said the thief to the king, it's the kindness that sets us apart. I admit if you'd known, you'd have given your throne for your heart. But your people have fled, your queen, she lies dead on the floor. Your reign is no more, reign is no more.
Dit is Noardewyn.
Goeie, en welkom bij Noardewyn. Joet met mij een bijzondere gast onder tafel vinden in het Omroep Friesland Café. Hij komt uit Engeland, wij hebben al een paar keer de gast bij mij in de studio. Hij heet Jeremy Johnson, is al een paar hier op een paters singer-songwriter. En het lijkt mij wel eens aardig om eens even met een boeteloze artiesten te praten. Want er zijn zijn ervaringen nog, net alleen in Nederland. Maar hij shot hij naar de wereld en hoe is hij opgegroeid bijvoorbeeld met de Engelse popcultuur. En hij is een verhaal dus. En in het bijzonder hem, omdat ik zijn versjes meer als waardeer. En hij een tijdje vriend ik nog met Marije de Vries hier uit deze provincie wij optreden had. Jeremy, welkom.
Willem, pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm going to talk a little bit in Frisian, in Dutch and in English.
Yeah, I love it.
Dit wordt een aardige mix van al die talen teruggekoord. Ik ken een beetje Nederlands met hem praten, omdat hij een tijd lang in Grijnsloon wennen had. I'm not telling you of the listeners that you lived in Groningen.
I did.
For a small period of time. How long did you live there?
I was there for about 3.5 years, I think. But it's interesting. Speaking of the language, I love learning Dutch, but I always feel very guilty that 3.5 years didn't teach me more Dutch. But I think my conclusion is that, because I've also lived in France and I speak French quite well, my conclusion is that the Dutch is so happy to speak English that it sort of creates this odd balance where you want to learn, but everyone's telling you, no, it's fine, just speak your English, it's good. And that's my excuse. But ik spreek een beetje Nederlands. Ik luisteren is beter voor mij dan spreken.
Please talk in English, because that's the best way.
That works,
I'm going to talk sometime in Dutch and in English. En dan pruttel we mooi wat teruggekomen. En dan hoop ik dat jouw tussen in ieder geval een mooi verhaal mee krijgen. Hij had ik een nice keer een verhaal, want net alleen in Frankrijk, maar ik in Afrika. You lived in Africa.
I did.
For a while. About Groningen, what did you do there? You weren't there as a musician?
No, so I went a more traditional route with my life. In the beginning, I went to school and then university, and the two things I really loved at school were earth science. I was very passionate about geography. I was good at it as well, and music. And those were the two things that I really found a calling in. But unfortunately with music, I had a bad experience with one of my exams. I didn't do very well with one of my exams and nearly failed my music exam, believe it or not. And so I decided to go and do university in earth science and do geology. And so that took me into the world of geoscience. And here in the Netherlands, you have a great history of studying the subsurface from, the North Province is packed, or used to be packed, full of natural gas, for example. Now there's this burgeoning geothermal industry with kind of harnessing the energy from the earth. And so that's why I ended up getting pulled to the Netherlands for a job in my mid-20s. And I was here for 3.5 years working as a geoscientist on understanding the subsurface of the Netherlands and the North Sea as well. So, yeah.
You stayed in the stad Groningen and you were in the city?
Yes, I was. Exactly. So I spent 3.5 years living in different places in the city, and it was a real. I didn't realize going to Groningen, but it's a fantastic music city. Considering where it is, it gets amazing investment from music. It has some wonderful festivals, some globally recognized festivals. Obviously, Eurosonic Noorderslag is the primary example. And I think that being in that environment with the wealth of the talent in the north of the Netherlands from a musical perspective as well, encouraged me back into a musical place. And then at some point in my early 30s, I thought maybe it's worth having a go at being a musician full-time and moving away from geoscience. And I kind of did and never looked back. So I have a lot to thank the north of the Netherlands for, definitely, yeah.
Je komt uit Engeland.
Yep.
i.v.m. Ja. En net onder Birmingham.
Yes.
Onder de rook van.
Ja, ja.
Worcester.
Yes.
Wat is dat voor stadje? En was jij meer gericht op Londen of op Birmingham? Of ben jij vrij lang in dat kleine dorpje, dat stadje gebleven hangen?
I mean, I would say I feel like a bit of a nomad. I moved around a lot anyway when I was younger. And so I don't think I identify as being from Birmingham. The way that, and it's probably the same here in the Netherlands, the way that cities work in the UK is it creates a real city identity. And if you can be from near a city, but unless you're from the city, it's a different thing. So.
Ja, zo'n vrij scherpe grens dus.
Exactly, yeah. And so I always felt like a country boy. I always felt like I identified more with, maybe as a bit more of a boer, more of a farming kind of stock kind of guy, and what the nature of the countryside means, and so but nevertheless I moved around a lot when I was younger, and I did most of my teenage years in Worcestershire and Evesham, and so I kind of feel like I'm more of a country kind of guy, which also makes me very comfortable somewhere like Friesland, because I think it's a similar sort of vibe. It's very much about that relationship between nature and humanity.
And it's near by the Cotswolds. Huh? It's beautiful.
Yes, beautiful area.
Yeah.
Well, I was just chatting to a friend's parents who are big fans of. There's a TV series called Clarkson's Farm, and Jeremy Clarkson, who used to do Top Gear and various things. He's
on Prime Video now.
Exactly, yeah. And that's actually just 10 minutes from where I grew up. So like,
it's in the second season. I saw it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I can imagine.
He's a phenomenon in England, isn't he?
Incredible. Like,
we have Johan Derksen here.
Yeah,
he's a brutal guy. A little bit right-wing talk.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got the same role, I think, a little bit in England.
He's a powerhouse, and he. It seems everything he does turns to gold. The fact that he can. I mean, apart from farming, which clearly he's not that good at. But
ook om de zoveel tijd is iedereen weer boos op hem. Everybody's angry about him.
Yeah, exactly.
The wrong column and the wrong words.
Still manages to have all the success, and
here I am.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that actually you can learn from a character like Jeremy Clarkson, or anyone, for example, that matter, is authenticity. It's leaning into what you are and not being too swayed by public opinion, and just saying, this is what I am. And as long as you're not causing too much pain and heartache to people, then I think it's a good thing. But he's certainly done that. He's very much himself. So, and that I find inspiring.
You're from England.
Yes.
How we are there as tourists and sometimes for a concert, and that's England for us, But how do the most Brits in England? Where are you from? Looking to the world, is het veel navelstaderij? Engeland is Engeland en daarbuiten bestaat niet zoveel. Een beetje op de Amerikaanse manier. Of hebben jullie wel de blik op Europa of wat? Hoe leven jullie daar? Hoe kijken jullie naar de wereld?
It's interesting because I think the narrative recently has been that the UK is more navel gazing than
because of the Brexit.
Because of Brexit, yeah. But the funny thing with Brexit was it really split the country. And I think, the vote was 50-50, but then within that 50% of people who voted to leave the EU, a lot of them didn't understand what the EU was. So, and I actually, it's interesting because at the time I was living here in the Netherlands, and I remember that the Netherlands did some vote on something in Dutch politics, and I remember watching the vote and thinking, okay, this is interesting. And then the people voted in favour of the thing, but the government turned around and said, unless there's a really big majority, we're going to veto and say that this is what's best for you. And I thought that was a really sensible way to do it, because often with these things, with complicated topics like, the EU and Brexit and all this sort of thing, you shouldn't have everybody having an opinion, because most people don't understand it. So what it turned into was an emotive exercise, and I think there's a lot of people who felt frustrated by the fact the UK is very uneven and unequal. Another thing that I love the Netherlands for, I think it's a lot flatter, like financially for people, and that just kind of like it created this vote, and it created this Brexit. But the truth of it is that I think there's a lot more people in the UK who are interested in the world. They love traveling. They're great external focused people, but Brexit really killed my heart, because it made me feel like everyone just looks at us like we want to be separate and we want to live on an island, and I don't know that that's true. I think
it's also the wrong idea of most of the British.
I would say that if you did the vote again, it wouldn't happen the way it did. I think it was. I think there were political forces where, people. One of the big issues with the UK is that the gap between the wealth and the poor is very large, and of course that means that a lot of the population they've got this kind of like discontentment about why is it so hard in this country? We're one of the most developed countries in the world. We should all be in a good position, and I'm personally that way politically, and I think what Brexit did was it fired up all that discontentment and said, right, well maybe the issue's the EU, maybe the EU's the problem, and yet the people who were voting for that to leave because the EU was the problem, they were the ones being benefited by the EU. So it just became this issue that I think the root of which is fundamentally the imbalance between the rich and the poor in the country. And I think that's one of the crucial differences between somewhere like the Netherlands and the UK. And that then creates some interesting social differences as well. So anyway.
Jij bent muzikant, je bent nu tijdelijk weer even in Nederland en straks ga je weer weg. Heel simpel. Kost het je veel meer tijd om bijvoorbeeld even een reisje naar Nederland te regelen voor jou nu? Of is it hard to organize your trip to Holland now? Harder than it was? Just practically?
No, actually.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the only thing that's changed for me, the interesting thing was that we have such a powerful music lobby that musicians and artists actually were the one group that did okay out of Brexit, because what happened was as soon as the Brexit vote was announced, a lot of high-profile musicians, I know that, for example, Elton John was very vocal in saying, this is terrible for musicians because Europe is where people go and they, in their early career, they go and get their experience and they come back and they play. And also for European musicians coming to the UK to, we've got some wonderful venues and lots of music fans there, and it would be terrible for music to lose that mobility. There was a lot of campaigning, and we managed to secure an agreement where it's a very loose agreement where people haven't really defined the details, but it basically says that there's an exemption for 3 months. So I can come to Europe without a working visa as an artist for 3 months and play my gigs and then go home, but I can't stay longer than 3 months. And before I could stay the whole year, obviously. But now it's limited to 3 months. So that's the only thing that's been an issue for me. Now, I love to tour in Europe. So I do come for my entire time. I go and play in France, and I play in the Netherlands and Germany and Switzerland as well. That's problematic for me, but it hasn't been as bad as if we had to then start getting visas to come and play, because that would have made it very financially difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
But otherwise, the system's kind of the same. I have my contacts and play my gigs, and that's great.
Perfect. En niet te veel papierwerk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thankfully.
Jeremy Johnson, je wordt te gast. Hij mij graag toeren, dat hij hem al even verteld. Had een hier of 3 jaar in Grenslo wonen in verband met de Groen, om het alleen plat te zeggen, naar hoe gas, maar ook hoe de Noordzee. Hij had eigenlijk dankzij een aantal optredens in Grenslo een keuze voor een toekomst in de muziek. En hij mij graag toeren. Frankrijk en Oerl is hij intussen wel West. We draaien nu het begin van het programma in verschillende nummers. The King and the Thief.
Yes.
The song.
Yeah.
What's the story behind the song?
The King and the Thief is a song that's basically about not knowing what you have until you lose it. You know, it's that classic thing of, particularly when you're younger. And I wrote this song, I mean, probably 9 years ago, 8-9 years ago. And the reason why I included it in the selection today was because I think it was one of the first songs that I really thought, oh, maybe I'm okay at music, and maybe maybe I can write songs.
Hey, I'm a musician.
I was almost surprised by the fact that I'd allowed myself into writing songs, and then I'd say, oh, this isn't terrible. And but yeah, it's basically about that naivety of not knowing, not valuing something until you don't have it anymore, and then going, oh, you know what, that was great. And I think that it took me a long time, it took me many years, probably until my mid-30s, to really start to think differently about that and start to value the things that I have and be grateful before those things move on and before life evolves. So it's really about that. But it's told through the narrative of kings and queens, and it's a little bit kind of hidden in that kind of storyline. But yeah.
Mooi nummer, het begin dus van hem. En het weer het eerste nummer werd hij bij zichzelf eigenlijk bewees van... hey, ik kan nummerscrew, ik ben een echte muzikant. Misschien kijk je er nog wat meer mee door. Second song is of Damien Rice. Also quite known here in Holland. Yeah. Is it a favorite of you?
The Damien Rice album, O, which Blower's Daughter is on. Blower's Daughter is a wonderful song that became famous, I think, through a number of films it was listed in, but it probably became, other than Cannonball, maybe the best known song of the album. And for me, it just represents this time in my life where I went to university in 2003, I think, or 2004 till 2007, and it was my time to become this individual. And I remember going into my first year of university, and this album had just been released, Damien Rice O, and I bought it and I started listening to it, and it was the first album where I just fell into it and I was lost in it, and it made me realize the power of music and the power of being a listener, and also the power of being a storyteller. And I basically learnt every single one of the songs on the album on guitar, and I also realized that I was transitioning to someone where playing music was really important. And so that album in particular is such a very powerful part of my history as a musician, and why I probably ended up being a singer-songwriter. And I'd like to meet Damien one day and say, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And so it is, the shorter story. No love, no glory. No hero in her sky.
Ja, mooi nummer. The Blower's Daughter, Damien Rice. Dit op het lijstje van mijn gast van jou, Jeremy Johnson. Ik heb hem al even vaststeld. Hij is een Engelse singer-songwriter. Gaat op allerlei verschillende plakken wennen op de wereld. Onder andere Grijnsland dus. Hij is op dit moment weer even in Nederland. En hij gaat ook weer waarom naar Engeland. Speelt hier een protte in de provincie. En het ligt mij wel eens even aardig. En daarom doen we dit jaar. Dat ik hem eens even door de eigen van een Engelsman naar de muziekwereld te zien. Naar zijn eigen carrière. En hij verstaat een beetje Nederlands, maar geen Fries nog. We're going to study you Frisian.
De volgende keer ik ben hier, de Nederlands zal zijn beter.
Even over het begin van jouw carrière. Did you play a lot in England?
No. No, the beginning of my career is the Netherlands.
Yeah, Groningen.
Yeah. Groningen, yeah. I mean, I really didn't play at all in the UK in my 20s. And then it was really when I got into my late 20s and I was here in the Netherlands that I started to go to open mics. And I mentioned there's a story in one of my songs called Time, where I talk about going to an open mic and feeling like I was finally being who I wanted to be, and, you know, kind of coming out of my shell a little bit. And that was all open mics in Groningen. And you know, run by good friends of mine, Marcia Schenkel, who now I'm in a band with, and Yeah, in particular venues. It's a great time for me, but it really started here, and I have a lot to thank the Netherlands for.
Want Engeland is voor ons nou de bakermat van de popmuziek, hè? Samen met Amerika.
Ja.
Hoe staat het er in Engeland voor op dit moment? Die muziekcultuur, de popmuziekcultuur, de singer-songwriters, de bands.
Ja.
Leeft dat nog als vanouds of niet? How does it live in England on this moment? The whole pop scene and young people starting a band, writing songs.
I think it's in comparison to here. Do you think, or just in general?
Because England, in our minds, it's pop music heaven. You know?
Yeah. Well,
the Beatles, Coldplay, name it. You know.
It's interesting. It's difficult. It's a difficult question to answer because I think the way that the system works in the UK, and it may be similar to here, is that usually, like you think about the Beatles, they're Liverpool. You think about Oasis, Manchester. Think about all these examples of bands who are linked to a scene. And if you grow up in the Liverpool scene, there will be this system, that you go into and you play the certain venues at the early days, and then you go up to the next stage of venues and you get to know the other musicians, and it's this pod of a few hundred people who are working together for the same goal and are sometimes against each other for the same goal. But because I never came through a system, I never came through a scene, it's hard for me to answer that question. So I've always been I'm an odd example of a British musician who basically started the worst way you can start, which is to try and get gigs everywhere immediately. So I was doing a couple of gigs in the Netherlands and a couple of gigs in the southwest of the UK and maybe a couple in London and a couple in wherever. And so I was never around a particular place and scene long enough to really understand how it works. And it's still to this day is...
You were more on a sideline watching.
Yeah, I don't know what the sort of analogy would be, but I do feel a little bit like outside of the system, which is an amazing place to be in one way, but it's also a scary place to be because also nobody's looking for me. It's like if I was a music booker or I was working for a label, or I was looking to work with new talent, I'd be looking at scenes. I'd be looking at Liverpool and saying, okay, who's the person in Liverpool?
Who's the new kid on the block or the new band on the block?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because I'm not in those scenes and I'm not connected, nobody's looking for me. So I'm sort of floating somewhere
You
up
won't
here.
be noticed by the business.
Yeah. But then in a way, I don't mind that because I've built my career independently and I love the independence of it. Obviously, I'd love somebody to come in and say, we like what you're doing and here's some opportunities, but...
Did you try to get a label or a management or an agency?
Not really. I didn't really know how. I think I just came into it sort of a bit blind and said, well, I love playing music and I'm going to try and find people who like to listen to me playing music and a bit of hard work later, and I have this sustainable independent career. But I didn't. I think it was maybe a little bit naive of me to just think, sure, I just go and be a musician, without any understanding of how the system works. But
Hoe heb je tot nu toe gewerkt? Ik bedoel, I hear some recordings of you. It's more a band sound.
Yeah.
You went into studios.
Yes.
Was it always abroad?
No, that particular album. So I left the Netherlands in 2016, and I just spent 18 months or so kind of finding out where my journey was going.
Yeah, because your first album was in 2018.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was writing music. I was traveling a lot. I went and lived in Australia and Indonesia for a while, and just wanted to have a little bit of a break and think about where my life was going. And then when I came back to the UK, I just happened to have, at the time I had a girlfriend who was from Suffolk, which is the east of the UK. And I thought, well, okay, might as well go there. Started busking, meeting people on the music scene. And then somebody suggested there's this studio with a producer down the road. Why don't you go and talk to him? And I did. And we started talking about the first album, Insecurity. And that's where we developed this more band orientated sound, and we we had musicians come in and play different things, and I worked with a drummer for the first time, and it was a wonderful experience. I was a bit naive again to everything. I kind of sat back and let the producer do everything.
Okay.
And I'd take a much more leading role now with my music. But yeah, it was great to work with other people.
Yeah.
So fostering collaboration is a great thing I love now. So.
Je bent een man van de wereld, a man of the world.
Like to think so.
I asked you for a couple of songs, and you came up with Damien Rice, but also with Radiohead.
Yes.
Really British band.
Yes.
I like it very much.
Yeah.
No discussion about that.
Yeah.
Was it one of your favorites? Of is it one of your favorites?
So this song, The Reckoner by Radiohead. Radiohead for me there's not, even now as a musician, there's not that many musicians that I listen to and I have no idea how they do it. You know, when I was younger and I listened to music, I was like, I had that feeling. But now I do it full time and I produce my own music, and I still listen to Radiohead and think, I have no idea
what is going on here. Yeah.
So for me, it's Radiohead represent awe. For me, they represent this feeling of total submersion in the musical art. And
is this about the writing of the songs, also the producing of the songs, or a combination of these both things, elements?
It's
maybe the lyrics.
It's everything, definitely.
Everything.
But I think what Radiohead I think are fantastic at are they individually they're very talented, but together they create this thing which is more than any individual part. You know, it's like that thing people say about...
It's a kind of atmosphere in their music.
Yeah.
There are a couple of layers in it.
Yeah.
You can't divine it.
Yeah.
It's hard to divine it. Maybe people... I can't, but maybe there are people who can divine it. But something about it.
Yeah.
This is
this
is something special.
Totally. And I almost don't want to know. You know, there's this kind of...
Don't kill the mystery.
Yeah, it's a bit like... I make this joke sometimes about magician and musician being quite a similar word, and I think there's something in that once you start to understand how a song is created and how, you know, music theory works, it takes something away, you know. And in a way, what I love about going and watching a magician do his thing or her thing, is that I don't know how it works, and I get a thrill out of that. And it's the same with music. And this is why, for me, this particular album with The Reckoner, which is called In Rainbows, it was an album that didn't really do particularly well for Radiohead. It was kind of a quiet release. But I happened to buy it and listen to it. And it's still my favourite album I've ever listened to, because it preserves the mystery and the spirituality in music for me. And every time I listen to it, I'm still like, you know, I don't think about how it works and what it's made of. I just listen and enjoy it, and so that's why I love it.
Just keep the mystery.
Exactly.
Ja, Radiohead. Fantastische band. Maar dat is natuurlijk smaak. Maar daarmee in dit programma gelukkig hoe praat worden. En dat noemen we Reckoner. En dat is uitzocht terug mijn gast van Jeremy Johnson. Engelse singer-songwriter, dus op dit tijd weer even in Nederland. En daarna gaat hij weer waarom naar Engeland en dan de Vrood-oer. Lijkt mij wel eens even een keer om met hem te praten. Om via zijn Engelse blik op de Vrood eens even te zien hoe zo'n muzikant denkt, doet en waarom had hij ding doet. Well, we talked about foreign countries. You lived in Angola, isn't it?
I did.
Also because of your job?
Yes, yeah. So I did a qualification in London during my early mid-20s, and while I was there, I was approached by an internship program run by the French government. And they'd only just allowed non-French people to be part of it.
Okay.
And basically what you do is you go and it's called, you know, a volunteer for international experience. And I loved the idea. You know, I thought, well, if somebody's going to send me to somewhere interesting and I'm going to spend a few months working out there, then great. And it was a French energy company that had a position in Angola for 18 months, and I went out and worked there, and it was astonishing. It's an amazing country.
Yeah, but because I read, and that's why I ask about it, is you also play there as a musician.
Yes, yeah.
And did you do the same thing that you do now, or was it a kind of mix with African music, or?
No, it was very early days. I mean, this is before I started playing open mics in Groningen, for example. This was me playing. There was the occasional kind of open podium type environment in bars in Angola, but also just playing on the beach with my friends. And that was one of the real early inceptions of going to the beach and camping overnight and making a big fire and sitting around with a bunch of my friends and both Angolan and European friends out for a trip, and just realizing that me playing music was something that people liked to listen to, and I became the guy with the guitar. Oh, Jeremy, we're going camping. You got to bring a guitar.
Yeah.
And then I started. It was that sort of seed which made me think, well, if these guys like me playing guitar, maybe other people will like me playing guitar. And it was slowly pushing me into this world of trying to be a musician full time. So it was an important part of the journey for sure.
And now you're here, 2023,
I know,
with a new album.
Yeah.
Into the After.
Yes.
What's about the title?
Yeah. So Into the After was a coronavirus album. I set myself the task of I wanted to take 12 months of the year, and I wanted to say, okay, each month my goal is to write, demo, produce, mix and master and release a song. So I wanted to do the whole process myself and then release the song.
And it was in England?
Yes. So I was locked down. It was I think it was 2021. So it was only the summer was free, but otherwise we were very much living in our bedrooms. And I did this project, and it felt like the thing that came after the album before. It felt like there wasn't really any string tying these songs together, but it felt like I was moving into the after of what had come before. And I couldn't think of a better title, so I thought, well, Into the After. So maybe because there was no reason for it other than because it came after.
Yeah.
And now I'm working on stuff that's a bit more focused and might have a different title. But
we gaan een nummer draaien. We're going to play a song, Frank's song.
Yes.
Is there a story about it?
There's a story about it, yeah. Frank's song is about a man called Frank Ritter. And when I first left the world of geoscience and went into music, I said to myself, I'm going to go and do music in places I love to be. And that was, at the time, the mountains and also by the sea. And so I went to the French Alps and I started playing in ski bars. I got a job in a ski bar. And one of these ski bars, I met this guy called Frank Ritter, who was an American expat. Big, shaggy, curly hair. He was sitting at the bar one day and I walked into this bar and had a chat with him. And I started working at the bar, and it turned out he was a musician. We started playing music together on a particular night of the week. And he was great, and he was one of the first people who said, I believe in you and you should be a musician. And I'd never really had somebody that focused who was also a musician say, yeah, you're good at this. Why wouldn't you do it? And so he was really important. And then really tragically, about a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago now, it's actually longer ago, he was playing a gig and he had a stroke on stage and died.
Okay.
And it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I wrote this song about him partly as a sort of way so that when I play this song, he's still there kind of as part of my journey. And I mention that in the song. But it sort of felt weirdly like poetic that this guy who had this philosophy of, well, we're going to die, so go and do what you love. And then he was doing what he loved when he died. It felt very important for me to really understand that lesson. And so I wrote the song.
Pull up a stool and we'll toast this day with a beer. So I threw down my bag and I stayed for a while, and I took a job at the bar. I'd serve Frankie's ale, and on Tuesday nights we sing and play our guitar.
Prachtig nummer van mijn gast van jou, Jeremy Johnson en Frank Song. Stiet op zijn laatste album, zijn nieuwste album, zet ik hem er even bij, Into the After. Straks daar nog een nummer, dat komt van Jamiroquai trouwens, ook een van zijn favorites, om het zo maar eens even nu te drukken. You're now on the road, playing Holland, France, whatever. Yeah. Recording albums. Have a lot of life experience, I think.
Yeah.
Where are you now in your career? Do you have an idea about it or not?
Yes.
Is it something of a planning in your head, or
loosely? Yeah. I think where I'm at now feels like I've created the foundation. You know, I don't feel like there's any reason why I would go back and do anything else with my life. You know, and that's an astonishing place to be, to say, yeah, this is me for the rest of my years. And the reason that's happened is because I've managed to create a financially sustainable part of my business, which is more in the function music side. And part of that, I think, is that I was focused very much on the original singer-songwriter route prior to COVID, and then COVID happened, and then I started saying, that's going to be really hard, because I completely run out of money. It's going to be really hard to only focus on selling singer-songwriter songs. So I kind of had to pivot a little bit and create a bit more of an entertainment side to what I do. And that's why I end up going to the French Alps and playing the après-ski scene. And
I saw some photos of high in the mountain.
Yeah. I had some really fun times.
Fun and drinking a beer, listening to your music.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I was always very protective of being a Damien Rice style singer-songwriter. And then when I released that and said, you know what, it's more about finding why I want to be a musician, I realized I love to entertain people. And I don't mind if it's through my music or through, and this is what, you mentioned the Jamiroquai song I suggested. This is what Jamiroquai represents for me, is it's the fun side of music. You know, I love Jamiroquai and I love what they do. And I've transitioned from being very focused on that kind of almost like self-aggrandizing side of music where you go, no, it's about me and it's about my story and I want to share that with the world, and going, it's not about me, it's about me being at service to other people. And I can do that in a number of ways. I can write songs and tell stories, and I can also just play funky music and get people dancing. And so I feel like that's where I'm at, and I'm really enjoying exploring all those angles, and I will continue to do so. And I more feel like a musical entrepreneur than a musician, actually. Like, I just love being involved in all these little different projects and having fun.
Is it a lonely life sometimes on the road, being guest?
Yeah.
A lot of times in here in Holland or France or wherever. A lot of time of the year you're a guest.
Yes.
At other people's lives and homes. There's nothing wrong with it.
No.
But I can imagine that. Do you still are a real British guy or a French or are you a global guy? How do you feel about that?
It can be very lonely, and I think
I can imagine. It sometimes feels like that.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is that when you're transitioning into something new and you're really pushing for it, a bit like starting up a music career, can be a very lonely process. To really do well, to say, no, I've got to play as many places as possible and meet as many people and be spreading out all my emotion and my energy, can be very lonely. But eventually, once you have this network, it becomes wonderful because you're not stuck in one place with the same people and the same very tight knit group. You sort of create this kind of larger family.
The people are not strangers anymore for you.
Omloop Friesland is and Noardewyn and i.v.m is an example of this. Like, I came here
3 years ago, I think, for the first time.
3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
And at the time, yes, that was an example of me meeting new people and being a bit kind of like, well, okay, what's happening here? But now I come back and I feel, we're friends, and I feel like this is, I'm recognised by the lady on reception, and it's, it's a
it
family.
gives you a good feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have that in a lot of places now, and so that's wonderful. But to get to the stage where I have this family all around the world and all around Europe, and that will continue to grow, you have to go through that period of loneliness for sure. So.
Okay, one mean question at the end.
Sure.
When are you ready? If you play in Wembley or something like that, what is your biggest dream?
What's my goal? Good question.
Even alle bescheidenheid weg.
Yeah.
Just give your dreams all the space it needs. Where do you want to go?
I think...
What's your biggest dream?
I think... I'm going to give a really annoying answer, which is that I think I've got to a place where I've realised that the real value in my life is in the process. And I used to, when I first started, I would have probably said, I want to do a global support tour with a well-known singer-songwriter, like someone like Ray LaMontagne or Damien Rice or someone. I'd love to. That would be my thing. Yeah, exactly. So, that would be my thing that I think, yeah, I've really made it.
I want to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. But now I just say, I love waking up every day and being a musician. And as long as that's the case, and as long as I'm still loving that, I think all the fun stuff that comes as a consequence of loving what you do and really being passionate about your process will naturally happen. And so in a way, getting to a place where I don't really mind what happens creates this world where all these amazing things start happening. And it's a very odd mental gymnastic that you have to do. But that's my annoying answer, is I don't really have an objective, and I love the process.
At last, Jamiroquai. We mentioned the name. Can't Heat.
Yeah.
Why this song? And you talked about Jamiroquai as an example.
Yeah.
How he is, writing music, producing music, how he's building up his career.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
He's a veteran.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You like this song?
Love this song. I love classic. I mean, this song's now 22, 23 years old. I mean, it's a really old song. But I love what Jamiroquai are. I love what they represent. And I think what they represent for me now is I've recently, last summer, set up a band called Mongrel. And it's me and a drummer called Charlie, who's great. And it felt like the evolution for me of me going, I've spoken about it a little bit before, but me going, my music career is about me, to going, my music career is about me serving other people and helping them having fun. And I think Jamiroquai represent the idea of a band writing and producing music for other people to dance to. And Mongrel is very much in that domain of, it's a very different thing to what I've done before. It's all goofy, funky music that we go and play in, dive bars and get people dancing. And I think for me, Jamiroquai in this song represents where I'm moving towards at the moment with my philosophy on being a music provider. And that's sort of why I thought it would be a nice song to end with.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Willem.
And always welcome.